Welcome back here on 8 p.m. Prime. We have a very special People First segment. Today is World AIDS Day.
Well, let's take you through some of those figures that certainly hold out hope. These figures coming by way of UN Aid that says there's been a 20% decline, both in the number of new infections and deaths in more than 52 countries globally. As far as India's progress is concerned, there's been a 50% drop in HIV/AIDS cases in the last decade. But it's still far higher compared to the rest of Asia. Some of those grim figures now, nearly 5 million people still living with HIV and AIDS in Asia. Half of them, 2.5 million HIV positive people, are here in India. 3 lakh people in India get no treatment at all. And there are lakhs that still await life-saving drugs. Well, more than half of all HIV and AIDS patients died due to tuberculosis. But what's proving more difficult, as our reporter from our health desk now points out, is the lack of awareness and the timely diagnosis.
Even 20 years, really, after the HIV virus got known about, CNNIBN's Shalini spoke to 2 HIV-positive people who want to share their stories here on World AIDS Day.
मेरा नाम सीता है और मैं HIV पॉजिटिव हूँ करीब 2 साल से। पर ये मैं नहीं जानती कि मतलब ये HIV पॉजिटिव मुझे कहाँ से लगी। HIV पॉजिटिव होने की वजह से मुझे टीबी भी हुई है। एक डॉक्टर ने आपने बोल रखा है कि टीबी है, तो दूसरे डॉक्टर ने बोला कि नहीं है। तो मैं किस डॉक्टर के पास मैं जाऊँ? दोबारा से जांच करने के बाद करीब 3 महीने के बाद मैं काफ़ी भाग दौड़ करने के बाद मुझे डॉक्टर ने बोला कि आपको टीबी है।
What's worse, doctors told Sita that more than half of HIV and AIDS patients in India die of tuberculosis. The delay in diagnosis of TB is actually an alarming health risk for more than 1 million HIV patients in India, like Sita.
41-year-old Hari Singh was diagnosed as HIV positive in 1994, but was not tested for TB till at least 4 years later. Hari Singh was never advised to visit a government's treatment or DOT center. Private doctors shockingly put him on TB treatment for 2 years longer than necessary, resulting in hospitalization again.
डॉक्टर को खुद भी शायद ये जानकारी नहीं थी कि ये कौन टीबी का ट्रीटमेंट कितने महीनों तक या कितने समय तक लेना है।
Sita and Hari Singh are both TB free today and work as volunteers with different NGOs on HIV/AIDS programs. Their hope, a new TB test on horizon called the Gene Xpert that can test for TB within 90 minutes.
Rapid, quicker, much better. These tests will tell you, one is whether the patient is harboring the bacteria, that is the Mycobacterium tuberculosis, and secondly, is he compatible with the drug?
We leave you this AIDS Day with a very strong message from Sita.
खुल के जीना है, मौज मस्ती से जीना है। ये नहीं कि हम HIV पॉजिटिव है तो यू नहीं, बिल्कुल हंसो 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 हंसो, बिल्कुल खुशी से।
In New Delhi, Shalini.
In fact, today Sita does join us in the studio. Also joining us on our People First segment, Loon Gangte. He's an HIV positive patient, also runs the Delhi network of positive people. And there in Bangalore, we are joined by Mr. Manohar, who also is an HIV positive activist. He is a coordinator for the group Sangam over there. Shalini, Sita, मैं आपसे पूछना चाहूँगी, पहले हमने देखा, आपने कहा हंसो हंसो हंसो। इतने सारी दिक्कतों के बाद आप हंसने की बात कैसे कर सकते हैं? आपने जितना देखा है पिछले 2 साल में, उसके बाद आप फिर भी हंस सकते हैं?
जी हाँ, क्योंकि मैं जानती हूँ कि HIV पॉजिटिव होने के बावजूद इंसान को कभी भी नर्वस नहीं होनी चाहिए। और पहली बात ये है कि HIV पॉजिटिव हमें हुआ है तो हमें इस बात का ख्याल ही मन में नहीं रखना चाहिए कि हमें HIV पॉजिटिव है, क्योंकि हर एक इंसान को अपने आत्मसम्मान से हमें खुल के जीना है कि HIV पॉजिटिव हमें हुआ, पर कहाँ से हुआ या कैसे हुआ, जैसे किसी की आदमी से होते हैं, किसी की हस्बैंड वाइफ से होते हैं, तो ये मतलब मन को ये नहीं सोचना चाहिए कि हमें कि HIV पॉजिटिव है तो हमें नर्वस नहीं होने चाहिए, कि हमें जीना है, हर पल जीना है, हर पल संघर्ष करना है, खुल के जीना है, ये नहीं कि घुटन से महसूस नहीं करनी चाहिए।
All right, that message very clearly. Don't think about being HIV positive. Think about just being positive. Mr. Manohar, if I could come to you, we're looking at some of those dramatic figures. Worldwide, 20% decline in the number of HIV infections, but more dramatically in India, 50% of a drop in the number of HIV/AIDS patients. Is that a good thing?
See, I'm not an expert on these issues, but one thing is that every year we know that around 7 to 10% of HIV positive people on first line ART are dying. And we also don't know about the status of many people who don't know the HIV status.
Right.
And there might be a lot of deaths because of it. I think the numbers are going down. One of the reasons is these deaths.
Right. Underreporting is an issue that one often talks about when one talks about figures of HIV positive people. Loon, two big issues that they say in dealing with this. One has been the stigmatization of HIV positive people and of the disease of AIDS itself, and the second has been access to drugs. Many people still waiting in the queue, as a report there pointed out. How big an issue does that remain still? The access to drugs and stigma.
I think one of the biggest stigma is that one of the biggest violation of human rights is that people denying access to treatment is one of the biggest violation of human rights, according to me. And if you look at the recent report of the UNAIDS, the world, there are more than 10 million people are still waiting for treatment. Only 5 million has got treatment, and 10 million doesn't have a treatment. So I'm not looking at the 5 million, I'm looking at the 10 million people. How can these people get treatment like me and their life is being saved? And this is the biggest stigma, this is the biggest discrimination that one can face in our life. That's, I think.
Right, the antiretroviral therapy. Now, you're one of those at the forefront of demanding really that this EU FTA, the free trade agreement, be stopped from affecting the distribution of generic drugs that are produced in India. Give us a sense, for an HIV patient today, what would it mean in terms of the cost of their treatment if that was to go through?
If that has to go to, we will be going back to the era of pre-2000 era. Those days, one person treatment for 1 year costs $12,000 US per person per year. And today it comes to as low as $80 US per person per year. So if this EU-India free trade agreement, which they are going to sign the deal in Brazil in the next 9 days, that is 10 December, if this goes through, we will be going back to that 2000 era. Then only the rich Western country people who can afford $12,000 US will live, and the poor people in the developing countries will die. And mind you that the UNAIDS report 5 million people who are receiving, 80% are relying on Indian generic drugs. It's not just about India or me or my friend here, but it's all
about the third world, in fact. Many countries in Africa, many countries in South America looking to India for those generic drugs. Mr. Manohar, you were actually there today protesting against one of the state's HIV/AIDS functions. You disrupted that function over there. Do you think this access to generic drugs is going to be the biggest challenge really for HIV-positive patients in the near future?
It is going to be the biggest challenge, not only for our country, but all over the third world. And also, even the present stage, most of our ART drugs are supported through a global fund grant. We don't know what will happen once that grant ends. And governments are not telling us, even the present levels, who will pay for the treatment, because once you are positive, for a lifetime you should be on the treatment. Will the state government pay for it? Will the central government pay for it? Are there any plans? We don't know it at all. The government needs to tell us. In the Bangalore today, we protested basically in support of sex workers and sexual minorities because in their enthusiasm to test and reach out to more number of people, the government is actually violating people's human rights. They are giving very high targets which are leading to coercive methods, forcing people for testing and taking their personal information without people's consent, and also ICTC, the HIV test centers, not keeping the HIV status of people confidential. They are giving it to the NGOs, and everybody, the NGO staff are coming to know. And we are saying that yes, we need to encourage people to get tested, but in the process we should not be unethical. We should not violate their rights. We don't want this to become like another population control program. That's why we protested today.
Right, violation of rights is a common refrain one hears when different agencies, including the government, deals with this issue of HIV, AIDS. the WHO in fact believes that the elimination of mother to child transmission of HIV will be possible by 2015. That's certainly one of the statistics that hold out hope. But Sita, before we go, आप कुछ कहना चाहेंगे उन लोगों को अंडर रिपोर्टिंग कहते हैं, कई लोग आगे नहीं आते, अपना टेस्ट नहीं कराते, अपना HIV पॉजिटिव स्टेटस नहीं बताना चाहते इवन फैमिली को, उनको आप क्या बोलना चाहेंगे आज?
जी हाँ, मैं वो बहनों को बताना चाहती हूँ जो गांव में अधिकतर रहते हैं, और उनको मैं ये साफ खुल के बताना चाहती हूँ कि अभी हाल ही मेरे साथ 4 महीने पहले जब मैं टीबी की बीमार थी, मैं जब तो उस टाइम कई उसका भी नाम सीता ही था, क्योंकि वो HIV पॉजिटिव थी वो भी, और उनकी हस्बैंड को नहीं थे, और वो अपनी रिपोर्ट को फाड़ के मतलब फेंक दिया मेरे सामने। तो मैंने बोला कि आपको HIV पॉजिटिव है तो मुझे भी है, इसमें छिपा कर रखने से क्या फ़ायदा, क्योंकि हमें तो HIV पॉजिटिव है तो है, ये साइंस कोई झूठ नहीं हो सकता है कि आप। तो उसने बोला कि नहीं मुझे तो HIV पॉजिटिव नहीं है। मैंने कहा जब रिपोर्ट में आपकी आ गई तो इतनी बड़ी हॉस्पिटल में, तो आपको एक बार हॉस्पिटल दोबारा जाइए और उनको मतलब खुलेआम सबके सामने, ये अंदर छिपने की कोई ज़रूरत नहीं, जो हो गया सो हो गया, और आपको दवाई लेनी है। और टीबी की ट्रीटमेंट, उसने टीबी की दवाई भी नहीं ली और हॉस्पिटल भी जाकर दवाई नहीं ली। और मैं उनको सब बहनों को ये बताना चाहती हूँ कि कोई भी हो, चाहे मैं हूँ चाहे कोई भी हो, हालांकि मैं इतनी पढ़ी लिखी तो हूँ नहीं, फिर भी मैं सबको धन्यवाद करती हूँ कि मैं स्टूडियो में आई हूँ। और मैं सबको ये बताना चाहती हूँ कि कोई भी HIV पॉजिटिव हो, वो मतलब बिल्कुल ही नर्वस ना हो, वो अपना इलाज अच्छी से अच्छी तरह से करवाए और समय समय पर अपनी दवाई ले और ट्रीटमेंट हर समय पे समय ले, बस।
ऑलराइट, हौसला का आपका यहाँ मैसेज है on World AIDS Day. Certainly a message worth keeping in mind, even as those concerns really loom over the entire international community that deals with HIV and AIDS. We'd like to thank you, Sita Loongangte, also Manohar there in Bangalore, for joining us today.